Do you know what almost every dismissive avoidant secretly wishes you'd do after they reject you? Not texting them, not waiting around, but disappearing. Sounds wild? It's actually incredibly logical once you understand how their nervous system was programmed from childhood. It's not that they hate you, it's that closeness feels unsafe. And every time you try to prove your love after they pull away, it just feels like pressure. I'm Jim Rohn, and in today's video, I'm pulling back the curtain on a truth no one's talking about. Why walking away with calm self-respect makes avoidance feel safe and slowly miss you. We're diving deep into the emotional allergy avoidance experience, the reason distance feels like home to them, and the 3 hidden phases that unfold in their mind when you stop chasing and start letting go. If you've ever felt like you were losing your mind after being left, this video will shift your entire perspective on silence and show you how to use it as power. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss more grounded insights on attachment, healing, and reclaiming your peace after heartbreak. And stay until the very end, because I'm breaking down exactly how to detach the right way, not as a game, but as a return to your worth. Here's a truth you need to burn into your bones if you're dealing with a dismissive avoidant. Closeness isn't a reward for them, it's a trigger. When you open your heart, express your feelings, or try to pull them closer, you think you're creating connection, but to their nervous system, you've just pulled the fire alarm. This is what we call an emotional allergy response. Just like someone with a cat allergy doesn't hate cats, they just physically react to being near them. Avoidants don't hate intimacy, but they're emotionally wired to panic in its presence. Why? Because long ago, they learned a brutal lesson. The more I need, the more I hurt. They may have reached for love and got silence, asked for help and got punished. So their young, vulnerable brain didn't wire for connection, it wired for protection. And now, as adults, when someone gets too close, their body says, danger. And here's what you need to remember so you don't internalize their retreat. They're not rejecting you, they're retreating from their own feelings. But when you try to prove your love, when you stay to fix it, or wait around hoping they'll come back, you're unknowingly pushing them deeper into their protective shell. This isn't your fault. You are allowed to want closeness. You deserve emotional safety, but you are not required to hurt just to stay in someone's life. Avoidant behavior isn't a choice. It's a survival mechanism, an outdated operating system installed in childhood. And while intimacy may stir warmth in your heart, it makes them feel like they're losing control. That's why they run, pull away, or even deny their feelings altogether. This is where self-respect enters. Self-respect isn't about how much you understand them. It's about how much you're willing to stop abandoning yourself. So instead of asking, how do I get them to stop avoiding me? Ask, how do I stop avoiding my own needs? How do you stop excusing coldness? How do you stop believing that if you just love harder, they'll change? You don't need to make someone see your worth. You just need to live like it's non-negotiable. And sometimes that means stepping away, not to teach them a lesson, but to return to your dignity. Stay tuned, because in the next section, I'll show you exactly how that quiet, grounded detachment changes everything. And that brings us to a deeper truth. The avoidance behavior isn't just a temporary reaction, it's the result of a deeply embedded neural map formed in their earliest years. There's a famous experiment from the 1970s by scientist Colin Blakemore. He raised kittens in rooms with only vertical black and white stripes, no people, no toys, no variation. Just one kind of visual input, vertical lines. And the result? When those kittens were released into a normal environment, they literally couldn't see horizontal lines, balls rolling across the floor, invisible. Not because their eyes were broken, but because their brains had deleted what wasn't familiar. And guess what? The avoidant brain works in the same way. In those critical early years when the brain is soft and malleable, they were taught. Closeness can't be trusted, needing someone is dangerous. Intimacy leads to pain. If their caregiver was emotionally absent, cold, or inconsistent, those repeated experiences wired a definition of normal into their system. Just like those kittens couldn't process horizontal movement, avoidants can't fully process healthy love. Their mind filters it out, mistrusts it, or even rejects it, not because they don't want it, but because it doesn't match the programming they received. The result? The more loved they feel, the more suffocated they become. And so they pull away, not because they want to lose you, but because their nervous system doesn't know what to do with something so unfamiliar. So the question isn't, why can't they see my love is real? The question is, have they ever been wired to believe that kind of love is safe? And here is where your self-respect must rise. You are not here to heal what someone else refuses to face. You are not here to prove you're different from their mother. Because even if your love is pure and healthy, their nervous system until rewired may still scream threat. And the harder you try to stay and prove that your love is safe, the more you accidentally reinforce their core belief that real intimacy always demands that they change. In contrast, someone with self-worth knows, I don't need you to recognize the value of my love for it to remain valuable. And sometimes, it's your calm, unapologetic withdrawal that finally makes them see what they've been pushing away. Remember, you are not a horizontal line in a vertical world they can't perceive. You are light, and light does not dim itself for closed eyes. It simply shines until the other person chooses whether or not to open. And once you understand how their nervous system was shaped early in life, you'll begin to see something even more profound. They're not just reacting to love, they're reliving a cycle they've known all their lives. Because even if their brain has learned to fear closeness, deep down, they're still human, and humans crave connection. As John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, once said, the propensity to make strong emotional bonds to particular individuals is a basic component of human nature. Translation? No one actually wants to be alone, not even the avoidant. But here's their paradox. Their biology pulls them toward connection, while their nervous system panics when it arrives. And so they live in a loop. They find someone, they feel excitement, then closeness builds, they feel overwhelmed, and eventually, they leave. But when they leave, they're not just escaping you, they're returning to the normal they've always known. Isolation, self-sufficiency, and emotional silence. And ironically, that return brings them relief, but it doesn't last. After they withdraw, they enter what researchers call separation elation, a false high, a kind of giddy independence. They go out, they post happy photos, they laugh with friends, and you, if you're still attached, might believe, they really don't need me. But you must stay grounded. That rush of relief is just a temporary biochemical reaction to returning to their comfort zone. It's not their truth, because after that high fades, they're left facing what they always feared: emptiness. And that's the cycle they've repeated in almost every relationship. Wanting love, starting strong, feeling hope, then feeling smothered, running, feeling free, and eventually feeling alone. Why? Because freedom doesn't satisfy the need for attachment. And this is where you have a critical choice. If, when they hit that emptiness, you're still chasing, still hoping, still proving they'll experience you as the same old emotional pressure they ran from. But if you've detached, healed, and returned to your center, your absence creates a kind of silence they've never known. Silence without shame. And that silence, free of guilt, free of demands, begins to feel strange to them. Not because you're playing a game, but because you've stopped participating in the cycle. And when the old loop is interrupted, something else starts to stir inside them, something deeply human: longing. Longing for you, for warmth, for someone who was once there, and now isn't. And if they're mature enough, brave enough, and hurting enough, they may finally face what they've been avoiding all along. And if they're not, then your absence is still a gift, because at the very least, you broke the cycle they thought was normal. And it's in that moment when the familiar cycle breaks, and the silence begins to echo back their own emptiness, that something powerful can happen, if you have the strength to choose the hardest path: genuine detachment. Now, I know you've probably heard the cliché advice, just ignore them and they'll come back. But what I'm talking about isn't cold tactics or emotional manipulation. Real detachment isn't pretending you've moved on. It's when you genuinely don't need them to feel whole anymore. You're not faking busy, you are busy, living. You're not forcing a smile, you are grounded, because you've come home to yourself. The most successful stories, the ones where someone reconnects with an avoidant exile, have one glaring thing in common: they stopped chasing. They didn't try to fix. They didn't send dramatic closure texts. They just disappeared. Not out of punishment, but out of liberation. And something strange happens. The avoidant starts missing you. Not because you made them feel guilt or pressure, but because for the first time, they feel safe in your absence. It sounds paradoxical, but to someone who grew up emotionally neglected, distance doesn't mean rejection, it's the language they understand. When you're no longer present to trigger their avoidant reflex, their nervous system gets to rest. There's no emotional threat to escape. And in that stillness, they begin to remember what they denied. They remember you not from fear, but from curiosity, longing, and the core human drive to reconnect. But here's what you must grasp. True detachment is not a strategy to get them back. It's a declaration of self-worth. When you stop orbiting someone else's emotional volatility, you start rebuilding your own center, your feelings, your focus, your future. And from there, you're no longer magnetized by people who don't know how to love you well. Avoidance, if they're ever going to grow, can only do so when there's no one left trying to carry their emotional burden for them. And in your calm disappearance, they may finally see it. You're not their mother. You're not their savior. You're not a mirror for their fear anymore. You're a boundary. And whether they come back or not, that is the greatest gift you could ever give yourself. When you truly detach and step out of the cycle of chasing, something strange starts to unfold on the other side. The avoidant, the one who once seemed cold, indifferent, and emotionally unreachable, begins to go through a subtle inner journey, a sequence of emotional reactions I call the 3 phases of avoidant activation. Phase 1, perception override. Right after they reject you, most avoidants already expect your response. They assume you'll break down, beg, blow up their phone, or try to prove you're worth loving. Why? Because in the past, they've seen that pattern, or maybe you've reacted that way in previous breakups. In this phase, they're not actually thinking about you with warmth or hatred, they're simply placing you in a predictable emotional category. You're just like the rest, the person who won't leave, who'll come back no matter what. And that predictability gives them a false sense of calm. But if you don't react how they expect, if you don't chase, don't text, don't plead your case, they start to feel unsettled. Questions creep in. Why isn't she reaching out? Why isn't he fighting for me? Did I misread this? And this is where something critical happens. Their perception of you begins to shift. You're no longer the anxious one, the dependent one, the one they assumed would spiral. Suddenly, you are a person with self-respect and boundaries. And that creates the first emotional contradiction inside them. Phase 2, basking in comfort. Even though they might feel surprised or unsettled by your silence, the next phase is almost inevitable. They retreat into their comfort zone. This is where they return to emotional isolation, where no one touches their feelings, where there are no expectations, no intimacy, no change required. And here's the key. This stage has nothing to do with missing you. In fact, they may feel temporarily relieved, even euphoric. They focus on work, hobbies, friends, and post things that make it seem like they've moved on. To you, it might look like they're totally fine. But here's what you must remember. This is not healing, it's avoidance. They're not better, they're numbing. They're back in the only emotional state that's ever felt familiar, disconnection. But humans aren't built to live in isolation forever. So this false sense of peace will eventually give way to emptiness. And if you hold your boundary, if you don't break the silence or try to check in, your absence starts to create a space they're not used to. Stillness that isn't angry. Silence that doesn't guilt trip. That stillness begins to feel different. Phase 3, phantom fawning. And here's where things get interesting. If you've held your ground long enough, the avoidant may enter what I call phantom fawning, the quiet, subtle return of their curiosity and desire for connection. They won't say, "I miss you." They won't message, "Let's get back together." But they might start watching your stories, or accidentally, like an old post, or send you a totally neutral message, just to see if you'll respond. This is emotional recon, not vulnerability. They're testing the waters, trying to feel safe enough to reapproach without admitting they want to. But here's the danger. If you respond too eagerly, you reset the whole cycle. If you welcome them with open arms, they may feel overwhelmed again and retreat just as quickly. That's why your response in this phase must come from a place of stillness, not expectation. Be kind, be clear, but don't offer emotional energy that hasn't been earned. Only when you remain centered do they begin to sense, maybe I underestimated this person. And that, not tears or pleading, is what moves an avoidant the most. In summary, These three phases aren't a guaranteed roadmap to reconciliation, but understanding them helps you stop blaming yourself for their behavior. You start to see that every reaction they have is part of an old operating system. And when you step away with clarity and self-worth, you not only disrupt the cycle they've been stuck in, you also reclaim your peace. You've done enough. Now it's time to live like someone who knows they're worth choosing without needing to convince anyone of it. One of the most misunderstood parts of avoidant behavior is this: do they actually want to be alone? The answer isn't as simple as yes or no. What's deeper is this: for them, loneliness isn't just a choice, it's the default setting. It's home. In an avoidance emotional world, intermittent connection is their comfort zone. They don't feel safe with someone who's constantly available, consistently loving, endlessly understanding. In fact, that kind of presence makes them feel disoriented. Why? Because very early on, they learned closeness hurts. Needing someone gets you abandoned. So their brain developed a quiet, sophisticated self-protection mechanism: attachment from a distance. They need to know you're there, but not too close. They feel most at ease when you're not asking, not needing, not pressing in. Ironically, they relax when you start pulling away. This creates a deeply paradoxical form of connection. They don't trust love that stays. What they do trust is controlled absence, a kind of love they can test, touch, retreat from, without being consumed by it. So when you pull back, not in anger, but in grounded stillness, they don't panic like someone with an anxious style might. They feel relief, because distance is familiar. It's the emotional language they've always known. When someone cares, they eventually leave. But don't confuse that calm with closure. It's just the surface layer of a nervous system trained to suppress. Underneath, their primal human wiring still exists. It's quiet, slow-moving, but it's there. Here's the paradox. When you stop trying, stop reaching, stop hoping, stop decoding, they often become more receptive. Not because you're playing it cool, but because you're no longer triggering their defense system. In that space of comfortable loneliness, your presence, if it's non-intrusive, non-demanding, becomes oddly comforting. And there, in this strange territory of pressure-free affection, they get the rare chance to ask themselves, if this person is calm without me, maybe this is the one I shouldn't lose. But to reach that moment, it's not about silence at the right time. It's not about strategy. It's about authentic self-choosing. You don't need them back. You don't hate them. You just no longer need anything from them to define your worth. And from that place, if they return, you get to choose again, not wait to be chosen. This is the core lesson, not just in your connection with an avoidant, but in your emotional maturation as a whole. It's not that they love you more when you stop loving them. It's not that silence is a trick to make them miss you. It's that when you become absent in a calm, non-blaming, non-expectant way, you create an emotional environment their nervous system can actually tolerate. A space that doesn't pressure, doesn't push, doesn't demand vulnerability. And only then, if the moment is right, can emotional openness even begin to emerge. Your absence doesn't scream, "You'll regret this." It quietly says, "I won't stay where I lose myself." This doesn't come from bitterness, it comes from clarity. It's a choice made by someone who knows their limits, who understands dignity. Avoidant 7, beneath all the layers of self-protection, still long for connection like anyone else. But for them, safety only begins when no one clings too tightly. And paradoxically, it's your gentle, quiet release, the love that doesn't try to possess, that becomes the first kind of intimacy they can truly endure. You don't need tactics. You don't need to act detached or play it cool. When you step away, stop explaining, stop over-functioning. It's not a strategy, it's a return. A return to your center, a return to the rhythm of someone who will no longer sacrifice their essence just to be kept. And in that stillness, you stop being the emotional trigger in their story. You become a silent presence, and undemanding, non-intrusive. And that is what begins to create a sensation they've never had before. Connection without pressure. Understand this: the more you try to prove your worth, the more you unconsciously declare you doubt it. The more you chase, the more you invalidate your own value. And the longer you wait for them to choose you, the more you lose your own ability to choose. Avoidants don't suddenly fall in love when you withdraw love. They begin to see something differently only when you stop trying to convince them emotionally. That's when they're forced to ask, why aren't they waiting anymore? Why do they seem so peaceful? And for the first time, they see you not as someone who needs them, but as someone who chose themselves. The real question is not, will they come back? The question is, if they do, then what? Will you still rush to reopen your heart, even if nothing has changed? Can you approach the situation not from some dreamy hope they've finally realized your worth, but from the grounded clarity of someone who knows exactly who they are and won't compromise that? This isn't a war to win over the avoidant. It's your journey to overcome your own fear of abandonment. And as you walk that path, you'll begin to realize you never truly needed them to return. You just needed yourself whole, unshrinking, unwavering. And the beautiful truth is, when you live like someone who no longer needs to be chosen, you become someone who cannot be replaced, even by them. Because real love doesn't require performance. It doesn't demand that you shrink your light to make someone else comfortable. Real love sees you fully and says, I choose you, not because you bend to my comfort, but because you remain true to yourself. And if the avoidant can't do that, then you already know what your next move is. Not convincing, not repairing, just walking away carrying with you the light you once offered them and returning it to yourself.